Hi everyone, my name is Kat Savage and I'm a clinical hypnotherapist and wellbeing expert working in the creative arts sector. In my line of work, I get to meet some amazing, colourful people, from actors to artists, people who live their lives by their own rules, fueled by passion and determination to bring their unique talents into the world. I wanted to discover what it took for people to leave the usual 9 to 5 and hop on a dream, to capture their bravest moments and share these meaningful conversations with you, so that together we can explore the ideas, emotions, and moments that could potentially change our lives too. The Brave Moment podcast starts now, in the middle of the COVID pandemic, probably the bravest moment not only for my guests, but for the whole world. So let's keep talking, have some fun, and enjoy the show. Today's guest is hypno and equine therapist Chris Fleet. Chris has gained national recognition for his successful work with high-profile footballers and with prison inmates. He now runs the Devon School of Hypnotherapy, where I myself did some of my training. But it wasn't always like that for Chris. In the interview today, we discuss how Chris grew up in the wrong crowd, how having the courage to talk to some strangers in a bar one night gave him the motivation to change out his career as a builder for therapy work, how his beloved horses help him heal those with personal challenges, and how standing up for what you believe in can change your life and the lives of those around you. Therapist, teacher, animal lover, and personal friend, I introduce you to the wonderful man that is Chris Fleet. Hello, Chris, and welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. We're sat here today in what can only be described as a little piece of heaven in Devon. Would you agree?
It's a bit of heaven in Devon, yeah.
Just so that you know what's happening at home, listeners, I'm sat here in amongst the most beautiful fields. The sun is shining. Outside there are horses in paddocks. There are crazy dogs that collect stones in their mouths. And in amongst all of this is the hypnotherapist and my personal teacher, Chris. Can I take you back in your life to when you were 16 or 17? Would you believe it that you are here today?
No. 16 or 17, I was a very, very different character.
In what way?
I was just, well, without being all psychotherapist about it all, I was a scared little 12-year-old in a young man's body, trying to prove I was hard when I wasn't really.
What was your story back then?
I know now it was incredibly low self-esteem. So I was hanging around with lots of bad people. They seemed to think that they were gangsters, but they weren't really. They were just drunkards doing lots of things they shouldn't have been doing. Very rough pub, very Irish community. And I was working the buildings. And basically it was just one job to the next and one pub to the next. All in those days.
So literally, if you were to go back in time to that place now, you probably couldn't recognise yourself from where you are today.
No, I saw some photos and I was actually quite horrified of how I looked, because I wouldn't have wanted to bump into me. And I don't mean that sort of, roughy-tufty. It's just not a very nice person. But I know now it was just being a scared little boy inside a young man's body.
Do you think that influenced the reason why you ended up in therapy?
As a therapist.
Yes, as a therapist.
But yeah, yes, definitely. Definitely, without a shadow of a doubt. Although I didn't realise it at the time. At the time, when I came to be a hypnotherapist, it was with the intention of helping others. But I also now know, looking back, that it was also with the intention of helping myself. I remember one day distinctly, was building this housing estate in North London somewhere, and I was up to my shins in mud, and I was a hod carrier before becoming a bricklayer, and I had this hod on my shoulder, and my welly got stuck in the mud. It was pouring down with rain, and I was just thinking, do you know what, I'm worth more than this. But at the same time as that, I didn't know where to go with it. And then circumstances changed. I moved to Devon. And it's funny because you can move away to get away from a bunch of people, but you still meet the same people. So when I moved down to Devon, the first pubs I started looking for were pubs very similar to the ones I used to drink in London. And then because they're similar sort of pubs, you get similar sorts of people, and then you get into similar sorts of trouble. And then I had a oh blow it moment. And I was sitting in this pub in St Mary Church in Torquay, fantastic pub, and there was a great big long bench, and there was 3 of us sitting there, and these other guys, it was a Friday night, and they're talking about fishing. And I was saying, do you know what, I'm 21 years old, Friday night, sitting in this pub full of chunky knit sweaters, blokes smoking pipes, talking about them fishing. And I was incredibly shy. And there was these girls sitting down the other end of the table. So I just turned my back on my mates, not nastily, and started talking to them. And it is that moment when you decide that actually I don't really care what anybody else thinks or says. And then from there, it was really weird because all of a sudden it was like you feel free. And so anyway, off the back of that, not the girls I was talking to, but I landed up doing a walk for a friend of mine from London. His daughter died of leukemia when she was 3 or 4, and I was too embarrassed, I think is the right word, to go around and say sorry. But it stuck with me for ages, feeling that bad. So I did a sponsored walk. I thought I got 2 weeks off, I can either spend it in a pub or I can do something a bit different. And it's after I've had this blow it revelation. And so a dog and myself called Kelly, we walked from Torquay to Land's End on the coastal path. When we got to Land's End, there's meant to be all these people meeting, take photos and all the rest of it, but the government had called an election and nobody was interested. And I missed the last bus back to Penzance, so I had to walk back to Penzance. But I was staying with my friend's sister in Penzance. And then I cut a very long story short, about a year later, we landed up living together in Torquay, and we landed up getting married, moved up to Herefordshire, where I had a variety of jobs. And then foot and mouth struck. We built with a bare hands. We built an animal rescue centre, and it started off with a rabbit, I think, and that was it. It grew and grew and grew. At one point, we had 36 dogs, I think, and we had goats and hens and ducks and all sorts of stuff. We were called Hope to Help Animal Rescue, and then foot and mouth came along. The vets turned up. And this one vet, he'd been working with foot and mouth in South Africa, where it had been sort of all over the place. And he said, I really don't think you got it, but I've got to phone it in. So he phoned it in. The London turned round. He got a stay of execution for 24 hours, but London turned round Page Street and said, no, you got to kill him. So they did. We were put in lockdown for, I think it was 3 weeks. We weren't allowed off the property. So they destroyed all the cloven hooved animals. And something inside my wife broke. We went to the doctors. He put her on some antidepressants called Seroxat. Seroxat is banned in lots of countries in Europe. It's banned for adolescents over here because of the side effects, suicidal ideations, personality changes, all sorts of stuff. And my wife turned into somebody I really didn't know. At the same time as that, I was still sort of coming down here. And anyway, the marriage never survived it. We both moved back. My wife got sectioned, unfortunately. The marriage never survived it, like I say. It's horrible. She was going through living hell. And I was going through all the stages of debauchery you could possibly imagine. Yeah. And it was the dogs that kept me on a straight and narrow, funnily enough, because, if I go off to work, the dogs would be at home, so I'd have to come back for the dogs. I'll go to the pub, but I'd have to come back for the dogs, and they kept me They kept me sort of on the straight and narrow. And then I saw a course being advertised, very similar to the ones I run now. There's a weekend course in London with a lady called Valerie Austin. And since then, it's just sort of gone on. And it was, as much as I did it for my ex, I also found, like I was saying earlier, I got huge benefit of it.
So when you did that initial course and you discovered what hypnotherapy really was, what was it about hypnotherapy that drew you in and kept you there?
Well, it was that's a really good question. My back was playing up from years on the buildings, and I rented an office in a really horrible little place, not far from where we are now, but it was manky. And I'd sort of committed, and I would never recommend any of my students to do what I did. But yeah, I committed to it, missed mortgage payments and all sorts. And to start off with, I did it because it paid the bills and it was easier than going on building sites, but I was still doing a little bit of building. Then one day, it was really, really hot. There's a baking hot summer. We're in this place with no ventilation. And there was a woman came in, she worked in Tesco's or Sainsbury's or one of the things. They have these massive, great big freezers where they put the bread and other bits and pieces. And she was sweating as we both were. And so I told her to imagine, in hypnosis, that she was in the freezer at work. And all of a sudden she started getting goosebumps on her arms and started shivering. And that was the moment that I realised that actually it really did work. Because to be perfectly honest, prior to that, it was like, it's a few quid. But I didn't genuinely believe it until I saw that. And then I got a break after my divorce and everything. I spent a lot of time at Torquay Football Club. I love Torquay United, absolutely fantastic, because it's such a family club and everybody's so approachable, the players, the management, the managing director, everybody, the chairman, the whole lot. And I approached the manager, Leroy Rossini, and I said, well, look, because Torquay were really struggling at the time, and I said, I might be able to help. And I mentioned hypnotherapy. And he said, well, he had hypnotherapy as a player, and so he's, he believes in it, he trusts it. Spoke to the chairman, and we struck a deal. The deal was I wouldn't charge any money at all, but I could have any publicity that came off the back of it. And they would, we'll just give it a go. What harm could it do? So I went into the dressing room, sat down with the players, and I just said, well, look, this is me, this is what I do. If you're interested, free of charge. And I think about 7 or 8 players came along. And we started doing stuff one-to-one. And people don't quite understand the pressure that footballers are under. And the higher up the levels they go, all people see is the money. But that's just the very tip of the iceberg. There's lots of stuff underneath, relationship problems, career worries.
They're human, probably.
Yeah. And quite often, those that are at top of the tree, they haven't had the schooling in life that we have, and they don't quite get it. But anyway, started working with them as individuals, and then started doing stuff as collectively as a group, and the results started improving. And at one point, Torquay were bottom of the old 4th division, and Birmingham City were doing okay. I think Birmingham City might have been struggling actually in the what's now the Premiership, the old 1st division, and Torquay played them at home, and I'd done some work with the lads before the game, and we absolutely thrashed them, but didn't score. I think a guy called Steve Woods hit the post or the crossbar or something, but we're absolutely all over him, absolutely hammered him, but it was 0-0. And off the back of that, I got in touch with a guy who did some publicity for me, and next thing I knew, I was on the red sofa on BBC Breakfast, every BBC radio station, newspapers, the whole lot. And it was like, do you know what, I've committed.
Yeah.
Because back then, it was like akin to witch doctory.
Yeah.
People, they think of stage stuff and all the rest of it.
Well, talking about that, What's sort of a bog standard response from someone that doesn't really get it?
I met a bloke in a pub. Met a bloke I used to work with on the buildings of the pub, and I won't swear, but he said, "What you do is," and I says, "Oh, well, what do I do?" And he says, "I don't know, but it's a load of old." And I says, "Well, if you don't know what I do," but that's just it. People hear the word hypno. And people tend to think it's all about clucking like chickens. They see stuff on television. I think people think it's mind control. But you know as well as anybody else, it's not.
No. And hypnosis is very different to hypnotherapy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Taking you back to that moment where, you know, you've just got off the red sofa and you're at that heightened point. How did that misconception change when you started to approach people with that kind of gravitas behind you? Did you feel they opened up, or did you still get that same kind of witch doctor response?
It's still, I mean, it's weird. I used to do an awful lot of networking, you know, business networking events, and I'd find that there'd be a portion of the room, roughly about a third, would just switch off.
That's really interesting.
Wouldn't want to know. There'd be another third would be like, yeah, you know, we'll have a listen, and maybe we might, you know, we'll send somebody to him, but I won't go myself. But then the final third, they're like, wow, tell me more. And so they're the ones that I'm interested in working with.
Yeah. I know that obviously through taking your amazing course myself, that you've mentioned quite a few very, very successful pioneers of hypnotherapy in their time. Who would you say is your biggest influence?
I really, really like the work that Gil Boyne did. I don't think we'd use a lot of his techniques now. You've seen some of the videos that he did. So some of the techniques we wouldn't use, but the way he goes about doing things. So he'll use something called the effect bridge. So he'll bring up an emotion in somebody, and then you can use that emotion to go right the way back to the first time you felt that way. And funnily enough, we had a lady in yesterday, and with her, there was, you know, history of depression and anxiety and the like, and so I didn't use the same techniques as Gil in the way that he got her to feel that feeling, but I got her to feel those feelings of depression and anxiety. And then it's very much a case of, right, in a moment, count from 1 to 3, you're going to go way back to the time you very first felt that way. And all of a sudden, it's like, you can see on her face the shock. I'm 5 years old. I'm just really sad. I'm in my room, and all these different things. And afterwards, she said, you know what, I've had counselling for years, and I'd completely forgotten about that. So the counsellor took me back to a time when I was 12. I remembered that one, but that's on a conscious level. But where the hypnotherapy works, it can take you there on an unconscious level. So things that you don't remember them until you remember them. You know, you've forgotten all about it.
Do you find that every time you do it, you're even more fascinated by the subconscious? Does it constantly surprise you, or do you see the same thing over and over again? There
are patterns, and quite often it'll come down to mum, dad, brother, sister, teachers. You know, a huge amount of the time. However, there's always things that are surprising. Being a builder, you know, from my early days, quite grounded, I like to think. And the whole idea of past life regression, if anybody said that to me years ago, I'd have just laughed. I'd have, what a load of old
I remember when the module came up, part of me was scared because I was thinking, oh, you're going to take me back to when I was some kind of Chinese prince or something like that. But when you started to explain it, oh, wow, that was amazing. Tell our listeners, what does past life regression mean for you?
I'm not even sure you're allowed to call it past life regression anymore. I think you have to call it recovered memories, but because there's no evidence of you know, concrete evidence of past lives. There's various different theories. I think from experience, the most common thing is what people are going through in their current life, they will try to find a meaning for, and because they want to believe in a past life, then they will put themselves into that. They'll create something. and say, and that's why I'm like this. And in many ways, it could be absolving themselves of responsibility. It's not my fault. It's my past life. And it could be that we've heard something in the background, we've read something, and forgotten all about it, or whatever it is, but it still gets stored there and it comes forward. Or it could be something very genuine. And there's so many anecdotal stories out there. And like I say, I've seen stuff and witnessed stuff that I thought, well, really? You know, it's... So there's one of the students responds really, really well. And all of a sudden, she went back to marrying, being put into an arranged marriage to this guy in Liverpool who was a shipping magnate, who was gay. She said it was a short 3-mile walk to the church. And she named the church, she named the road that she was living in Liverpool, and all this, that and the other. So anyway, we're taking notes, and all you do is you explore and tell me what happened next, what can you see, you know, is there any, all this, that and the other. And we started Googling it afterwards, and the road that she talked about exists to this day. She's never been to Liverpool. The road exists to this day, but we couldn't find any trace of the church. But somebody did a search of churches within a 3-mile radius and found a couple, and one of them had got destroyed in the Blitz, but it was on the site of a church previous to that, and the church that was there before when they rebuilt the church, they renamed it.
Oh wow!
Yeah. And it was so that was very odd.
That's astounding, really, isn't it? And I mean, you know, we're so complex as human beings anyway. I mean, who knows how deep our minds and our DNA codes go?
Yeah, I mean, there's genetic memory, isn't there?
Moving on a little bit, how would your daughter describe what you do?
How would my daughter describe what I do? She won't let me do anything with her because she says, enough. Dad, you're doing your weird voice again.
So you can't use it to get what you want at home?
No. Although my wife, Carol, she thinks I'm 6'6" and good looking. But yeah, it is weird. It's very difficult to work with people you know very well.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. I could never hypnotise Carol now.
Yeah.
She'd see me naked. She'll never take me seriously ever again.
I knew this interview would be fun today. I absolutely knew it. Taking you back to your clients, has there been one case or a couple of cases in particular that have really touched your heart, that have made you change your practice as a consequence?
There's one person who obviously has to remain nameless. If they'd have put her story into EastEnders, nobody would believe it because it'd be too far-fetched. She had been abducted, she had been physically, mentally, emotionally scarred, she'd been set fire to, all sorts, absolutely all sorts. And it's stuff that just was absolutely astounding. And now she's doing okay. She's doing all right. I can't go into any details because for obvious reasons, but that was one that really really got me. And then I remember her father standing up and giving a testimonial at a meeting about it all, and he's saying, you know, the stuff, you can heal the physical scars, but he said, you know, but this man here, and pointed at me, really went a long way to healing the mental scars. And he started blubbering like a... because it's such a nice thing. And he was, you know, it's quite an emotional thing. And then, especially early on, when I very first qualified, there was a lady and she couldn't leave her flat. Cut a long story short, she got married. She drove a massive, great big SUV thing all around New Zealand. Her friends, in their wisdom, took her to Amsterdam for a hen weekend, but instead of just taking to anywhere in Amsterdam, they got a hotel in the red light district, which, bearing in mind what happened to her, was the worst. They just didn't think. But she was fine. She was absolutely fine. And again, that was where to me, it was like, some stuff, if you don't really, some stuff you might say, oh, it's just a coincidence. But there's things like that. It can't be. You know? And that's some of the stuff that happened with the football. It's just a coincidence. It's just a coincidence that you were working with them that time and they did that. Those coincidences happens about 5 times over the last few years. But it's just a coincidence.
Talking of those really sensitive clients that have quite extreme pasts, I know that now, you're evolving your therapy into therapeutic means with horses, aren't you? How do you think that working with animals helps to free up the mind in order to heal?
Well, I'll give you an example, first of all. I was volunteering in a local prison, working with guys that were in there for drug-related crimes. A horse doesn't care how much bling you've got. A horse doesn't care how much money you've got, how many girls you've been with, or what a hard nut you are. And when you see Mr. Hardman, all rippling in muscles and covered in tattoos, you met Guinness. I mean, he's only a baby yet, and he's a big lad.
We should say that Guinness is a horse outside.
Yes. Sorry, Guinness is one of our horses. When you get one of these people meet half a ton of beast that doesn't care how hard it is, then all of a sudden they have to behave differently. So we had a bit of a do up here, and there was a girl came along, suffers with anxiety. So I introduced her to one of our other horses, Guinness's sister, Lucy Brown.
Is that the one that looks like a unicorn?
I was going to say, yeah, she looks like a unicorn. And I said to this girl's boyfriend, I said, come on, let's just leave them to it. Anyway, this girl came back about 20 minutes, half hour later, makeup all over the place. And Lucy had just come up and rested her head on this girl's chest and just left it there. At which point this girl started, all of this emotion started coming out. Then it moved its head down to a tummy area, and there was no words. There was no nothing. There was just the girl said there was just this release. And I don't really want to go into all the weirdy stuff that I don't really know about. I'm sure other people would be able to sort of come out with more esoteric reasons. And I genuinely don't know. It was just, when I did my training, one of the ladies, a magnificent lady, Debbie LaHaye, she turned around and she said, well, look, if we're not an alpha member of the pack, but we are a provider. And if there's something wrong with us, emotionally or whatever it might be, then it's in the horse's best interest to help us. And whether that's just like the horse version, putting his head on you, it might be the horsey version of giving you a cuddle, I don't know. But it's just very, very calming, very therapeutic. If I have a day of it at work, then for me, just coming back and spending time with a horse, and you're a mindfulness practitioner, just being very, very mindful and working with the horse, it's fantastic. And they react. They just sense, they just know. So if you go in there and you're a bit het up, they'll stay away from you. It shows in their body language. So you become very mindful. You breathe and you slow everything down, and the horse will come over to you. It's bizarre.
That's incredible. So, describe for me a typical equine therapy session. Do you just leave a person in a field with the horse and the horse does the rest? Or is there some kind of programming or discipline throughout that session?
Various people have various ways of doing it. The way that we will do it is, first of all, we'll get somebody to just watch the horses, just see how they interact with one another, because quite often we can then relate that to ourselves in our own environment, see how people just work with one another, and see how animals work with one another. Some of the things that we'll do is we've got a sound school out the back, and so there's something called join up, which is where you sort of get this horse just to follow you around. But we'll ask somebody to get a horse. There's no lead rein, no tack, nothing on the horse whatsoever. And we'll get the person needs to get the horse with body language and intent. So yeah, it's a fantastic thing to do. It's really cool, and this horse will start to follow you around. But if you're showing signs of aggression, if you're showing signs of anxiety, if you're not on the horse's terms, it's not going to happen.
So do you find that people that have high anxiety and things like that coming into the stables for the first time, do you feel because they really want to work with the horse that they adjust almost unconsciously to the horse's energy? Or does the horse pick them?
Quite often the horse will pick them. So again, going back to that girl I was talking about, when we went into the big field at the bottom, there's one of the horses, our daughter's pony, Stormy. She didn't particularly like adults that much, but she just came from the bottom of the field, came legging it up, and just went straight to this girl. And they'll pick you out. And sometimes they'll just be in a bad mood.
Yeah.
So same as us, they're no different. And sometimes you just don't want to know. Not today, thank you.
It must be really hard, like thinking about you as a therapist. Obviously, in your day-to-day, and even with the horses, you are receiving a lot of heavy emotional information. I mean, how do you not take that home with you? How do you separate your therapeutic persona to your home persona? How can you stay a little bit distanced from that?
I've got a wonderful family. In answer to your question, I don't really know. You just switch off. So work is work, home is home. The only times I've really come unstuck is when I've brought work home with me, emotionally. And it doesn't mean you don't care, because you do. You wouldn't be able to do this job if you didn't care. But equally, it doesn't pay to get too involved, because the moment you get too involved, then you're lost. And the client is running you rather than you helping the client. It's so that the whole thing is working together. The client yourself working as a unit. But the moment you get too emotionally involved, then that professionalism slips, and you go elsewhere. And it's not nice when you bring stuff home.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, in your life so far, you've seen so much. You've helped so many people. How has that changed your values as a human being?
It's like watching your kids grow up. You don't see the difference day by day. It's only when you look back. I think there's a lot more understanding about people. There's a lot more understanding about how people work. But I was saying to this girl yesterday, she was struggling. She's gone off to uni for the first time. And so we did a Zoom session. And I was saying, look, it's okay. We all get anxious. We all get depressed. We all get angry. We all have these emotions. It's just being able to turn around and say, actually, I can see what's happening to me now. And then being able to come away from it. It's when people hold on to it for days, sometimes weeks, sometimes a lifetime. That's when it's. So I think that's the big difference that's happened. Still get these moods, because you're human, but I don't think I hold on to them.
How do you think that's helped you evolve?
One of the biggest things that I say to myself on a regular basis some days is, if it's the worst thing that happens in life, whatever happens, if it's the worst thing that happens in life, it's not a bad life. And so what that's done for me is it's helped put things into perspective, so that if something unfortunate happens, rather than letting it build up and build up and build up and build up, and then it's like, oh, my life is rubbish, it's just, you know what, it is. And so you can let things go easily.
Finally, I have to ask, as you know, the podcast is called The Brave Moment. What do you consider your bravest moment?
Ooh. One of my bravest moments, I think, was telling the world what I do. Because, like I say, 18 years ago now, this was akin to witch doctory. And to turn around and say, I'm a hypnotherapist, and people turn around to your face and say, what you do is rubbish, you're a fraud, you're this, and still carry on. There was another time, and it's nothing to do with hypnotherapy really, but it's to do with a football club. There was this guy had taken over the football club at Torquay United, and I was chairman of the supporters club, which then became the supporters trust at the time, and we stood up to him, and I had to be the mouthpiece, and so when all the flack came, it came to me, and I remember my dad, bless him, one of the last things that he knew about me was this bloke called me all the names under the sun on Sky Sports News. And that's probably one of the last things he heard about me before he died, which wasn't very pleasant. And so I think it was quite a tough challenge, not biting back and getting into that word of war of words in a nasty way. So, yeah.
So what piece of advice would you give to those people that are thinking of changing out their usual 9 to 5 to something a bit more creative, holistic? What's the one piece of advice you wish that you had when you started out in this business?
Just do it.
Just do it.
What seriously, what is the very worst thing that could happen? If you've got a skill set, if you've got something you can do, and it's something you'll always be able to do, then you can always go back to that.
Thank you so much, Chris, for being on the show today. Just so that the people at home know, where can they find you on the internet?
Well, if you Google Chris Fleet, or Chris Fleet Hypnotherapy, you'll find me. There's Hypnotherapy Training Devon, or hypnotherapy-training-devon.com, or just Google Chris Fleet Hypnotherapy.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you.
It was lovely to catch up with Chris and to see him in his element, surrounded by beautiful, happy, mostly rescued animals roaming around acres of Devon countryside. Chris has always been so honest about his life experiences and is never afraid to admit to who he was before the person he is now. In this day and age, I think it's hard sometimes to admit to our background or who we really are underneath the gloss of social media or the pressure to be perfect. But Chris is a shining example of the fact that if you can be authentic to all the aspects of your story, then you allow yourself the opportunity to really acknowledge who you are and what you stand for. Chris is proof that your destiny can be changed at any point, that just because you may believe by looking at your circumstances that there is nothing more for you out there, all it takes is a little courage to step out of your comfort zone and press the reset button and start afresh with the ideas and ideals that you, not others, set for yourself. He showed that at first this may not be easy, that people may think you're crazy to journey away from what is considered to be your lot in life. But if you follow it through, if you commit to your actions, you can absolutely find success, and that new journey may lead you towards the type of people and places that you admire, and not only that, it may serve the people you love in the process. Maybe you feel stuck right now. Maybe things haven't gone quite to plan. Hey, we've all been there, myself included. But for most things, it's never too late to change your mind or take a chance on a different career. Yes, it may feel scary and it may mean making some sacrifices, either emotional or physical. But if you were years down the road, looking back on yourself right now, what would you tell yourself? What advice would you give to the person that you are today? Chris rightly points out that if you already have a skill set, then you can go for your dream. And if all else fails, you can always come back to those skills if things don't quite work out. As for those that don't know what they want just yet, know that your dream is a better place to start than maybe what appears to be true. Look to the people that inspire you, the people that represent where you want to be and follow in their footsteps. Remember, we have the ability to shape our lives at any point. We just need to believe that we're capable of it. Sometimes that may mean asking for help or waiting for that moment that you can, but brave doesn't always mean heroic or big. Sometimes it just means changing your outlook and believing that you are worth trusting and investing in, and that you won't let yourself down. So take a deep breath, set your intention, and start to sculpt out some daily goals that may lead you to where you want to be in the future. Remember, the most important part of your journey isn't the destination. It is simply recognizing that now is the time to begin. And as Nelson Mandela said, it always seems impossible until it's done. Next week, we talk to creative polymath extraordinaire Maggie Vassie of Maggie Makes, who has appeared in many a magazine with her extraordinary artistic talents. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the show. If you have a spare moment now, please like, subscribe, and tell me your thoughts in a review, which will really help other people like yourself to find the show. Of course, you can also share with your friends and follow us at the Brave Moment Podcast 2020 on Instagram or the Brave Moment Podcast on Facebook. If you're interested in getting in touch, pop on over to the therapy page Coping to Mastery on Facebook or via the website copingtomastery.org. It's been so wonderful to have you all here with me again. Please get in touch with the show with your own stories, and don't forget, your brave moment starts now.